Welcome everybody and say good morning. Welcome to the Alliance e-channel, our leads presentation. This morning we have joining us our Supervisors of Elections from Sarasota County, Ron Turner, and Supervisor of Elections, Manatee County, Mike Bennett. Thank you both for joining us this morning. As you entered the room, you saw scrolling in the background our Lakewood Ranch Business Alliance annual sponsors, presidential sponsors, executive level sponsors, and several of our other level sponsors. We wouldn't be able to do what we do every day and what we've done for sure for the last 3 months without those sponsor dollars. We've had free events through March, April, and May, and most of June will be following in the same accord and will remain free. So we continue to help small business. We believe it's the backbone of our economy, both nationally and here locally, and we hope to continue to educate, connect, and grow our services through those businesses. So this morning, we're here electronically. We normally gather for these types of events on the leads at the Kaiser University, but given what we're dealing with today, we're doing things a little bit more strategic. I think Mike and Ron will talk a little bit about how those strategic changes may happen as well in the process of election. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background. Mr. Bennett took the office of the elections in 2013 and was reelected in 2016. And prior to that was in the Florida Senate for 10 years. And before that, the House of Representatives. So brings with him varied knowledge in building code, land regulation, and other construction industry issues. Currently, his duties, obviously, as the Supervisor of Elections, and also in the business development consultant with Bright Future Electric. So after I get finished, we'll give Mr. Bennett a round of applause before he gets started, or whoever, which they can toss a coin and see who's going to go first. But on the other side of our county, down to our south, Ron Turner, elected in 2016 to the Supervisor of Election in Sarasota County. But before that, he was no stranger. He was the Sarasota County Elections Office Chief of Staff, serving from 2011 until 2016 when he was elected into the supervisor role. He serves as the treasurer of the Florida Supervisors of Elections Statewide Association and does significant in community involvement throughout the county as well. So I want to welcome both Ron and Mike to the stage, quote unquote, and thank you in advance, and I'll thank you again at the end. So I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thanks. And Ron, I guess we were looking at an agenda, and I guess I'm going first. So I'm going to do that right now. But first of all, I want to thank you all for putting this together. You know, about election time, every 3 or 4 years, it gets kind of crazy. It's getting a little crazier this year. With the virus going around, we've had some issues, and I'll let Ron address it. Sarasota County, I'll just talk specifically about Manatee County. But I think you all will find that pretty much Ron and I are in constant communications, and we do so much together in cooperation. And part of that is because of Lakewood Ranch. We both share such a huge part of Lakewood Ranch, and the confusion sometimes of even, are they in Manatee County or Sarasota County? Well, geez, they got a Sarasota County address. Where are they? So consequently, we really spend a lot of time talking to each other, making sure that we can get it done and get it done correctly and try to cut down on the confusion. This year, with the virus, we went through the presidential preference primary, and we had some problems. And our problems were we lost so many poll workers. We lost close to 30%, I think around 26% of our poll workers just called up and said, hey, we don't want to play. We don't want to come out and work. We don't want to, even though you're paying us, we do pay poll workers, Ron pays poll workers. But when people are terrified of their health, and especially most of our poll workers are senior citizens, they were scared to come out. So we had to consolidate a lot of precincts. And so we did it. We pulled it off with no lines. However, the presidential preference primary is not the general election that we're going to have in November. We are still going to be short. We're looking to combine those. We're looking to add more early voting sites, and we're really pushing strongly vote by mail. And I know a lot of your questions will come up later on about vote by mail. And if you didn't, and something that your group should do is steal the article from the Sarasota Herald Tribune that was all about vote by mail that Ron was extremely knowledgeable of, and he shared that information. And you should get that and pass it on to all of your membership and all of your guests. Ron, you did a great job on that. It was a great job. And I got to tell you, the reporter deserves a compliment too. Most of them don't take the time to go into the detail that the reporter did to interview you yesterday. So that's really where we're at. We don't expect any problems in the upcoming election, other than pushing the state to give us a little bit more flexibility. So many of the laws that we have in the state of Florida having to do with elections, and in so many other areas, they treat the state of Florida as one, and it's really truly not. What happens in Manatee County is not the same as Madison County, and Manatee County is definitely not the same as Miami-Dade or Broward. So we need the flexibility to run the election the best way that we can, and we're all willing to take the heat if it goes bad. But we think it's so important that the constituents of Manatee County have access to voting, and they can vote without standing in lines for a half hour. So that's pretty much where we're at. We'll continue to talk after we hear what Ron's got to say.
Well, thanks, Mike, and thanks to the Lakewood Ranch Business Alliance. It's great to be with you, and it's always great to be with my colleague, Mike Bennett. He and I talk a few times a week, at least by phone, to make sure that the two counties, since we share a border and Lakewood Ranch, and we share a media market, common media market here, that we are talking about the way that we're planning for our elections and the commonalities and things. Because if Mike does something in Manatee County that we're not doing in Sarasota County, believe me, I'll hear about it, and vice versa. So as Mike just explained, we had the presidential preference primary in Florida in March 17th. As you know, Governor DeSantis announced on March 1st that we had 2 COVID cases in Florida, 1 in Hillsborough County and 1 in Manatee County. And of course, as we know, that the case in Mike's county was, the gentleman was here at Sarasota Memorial Hospital, and a letter was released actually the day before on social media, March 1st and February 29th, about that COVID case. So for us here in our region, we have been dealing with this from the very beginning in the state of Florida because we had the initial cases here. So you're going from March 1st to March 17th, which is election day, and you've got early voting going the week prior to that. So we were dealing with the pandemic in the early days of the virus here and trying to deal with that. As Mike said, we had about 30% of our poll workers, we had about 180 poll workers in Sarasota County drop out and say they couldn't work. Most of that is because, again, of what the Supervisor Bennett said, which is many of our poll workers, the majority of them are older citizens. 69 years of age is the average age for a poll worker in Sarasota County. 73% of them are 65 and older. For a March election with a very fairly easy and straightforward ballot compared to a November election ballot, which is going to be substantially longer, and it's also for the presidency of the United States, as I call the general election, presidential general election, the Super Bowl of elections, if you're in the elections business. There is a world of difference between those two elections from an administration standpoint. We'll need almost double the amount of poll workers that we had from March to November. So we have concerns in Sarasota County, the same that Manatee County has, and elections administrators across Florida and across the United States, frankly, about where do we get the workforce in November potentially, and for our August primary. We have a primary August 18th. So the presidential preference primary was March 17th. What is the August primary on August 18th? Well, that is the primary election for every other office in Florida besides President of the United States. So from the congressional races down to county commission, school board will be on that ballot. So there are a number of races. There's even a state attorney race that appears in a primary in that. So there are a number of federal, state, county, local races that will be on the August ballot. So workforce is certainly a big issue for us. Obviously, there'll probably be questions about vote by mail. That's been certainly a topic that Mike and I and everyone else in Florida elections has been talking about recently. Mike did mention a great article. It was actually in Sarasota Magazine, not the Herald Tribune, not that the Herald Tribune doesn't do a great job, but it was Sarasota Magazine who did it, and Cooper Levy-Baker, to give a shout out to Cooper, he was the reporter that interviewed me and did a great job of explaining how Florida vote by mail works, and that what we're talking about with vote by mail in Florida is not a mail ballot election, because supervisors of elections in Florida, by Florida law, are not allowed to mail ballots to every voter in the county. There is a law about mail ballot elections, and that's not what we're talking about here. We don't even have the legal authority to send a ballot to everyone in the county. So there's some confusion, I think, about that from some of the conversations going on nationally. But with that, I'll kind of wrap up, and certainly we'll take questions, but it's good to be here with you. This is, as someone said at the beginning, this is an interesting year. I said that's about all I'm allowed to say as a supervisor of elections, is that it's interesting. All presidential years, all election years are interesting. And when you're in Florida as a supervisor of elections and you're dealing with election security and tight races, remember in 2018, we had 3 statewide recounts, which is unprecedented, I believe, anywhere in the country. And now you've got the presidency of the United States at stake, and throw in a pandemic on top of it. Florida is just ground zero in elections. It's the largest swing state in the country. So as Mike will tell you, it's definitely not dull on a daily basis here in the elections business, because there's always something new every day. And I had someone earlier ask when we were first logging in about, well, it'll probably be busy soon. Yes, it will ramp up, but I will tell you, it's already busy now at this point in the elections business and what we're doing. So with that, thank you, and happy to take questions with my colleague, Mike Bennett, who does a great job for you in Manatee County, by the way. So I think a lot of Supervisor Bennett, and just want to give him a shout out for the work that he and his staff do up there. They do a great job.
Supervisors, thank you so much for joining us here. I will encourage everyone to submit questions in the chat. We have a few already. But before we get to that, I do want to point out that Julia Heidi with Sarasota Magazine did share the link to that article in the chat. So definitely check that out. Lots of great information in there. I will start with a few questions. When we hear that some political people are saying that they're going to mail ballots to everyone, that's the kind of talk that creates concern. How can they mail ballots to everyone, and what are some of the things that people need to know about that? Ronnie touched on that a little bit already.
Well, I think the question is are we going to follow the pattern that a couple of other states have done, and that's just broadcast and mail out ballots? In the state of Florida, that's not legal. We don't do it. We only mail out ballots to people who request the ballot, okay? If it's a man and a wife, they're in the house together, and one of them requests a ballot, we do not send the other one back. Okay, we send ballots only to those people who are requesting. So there will not be a broadcast of mail ballots floating around. Some people are advocating for that, but that's not something, it's also kind of interesting. I don't think that we could do it right now, even if the governor came down and said, okay, we're going to do it, mail everybody a ballot. The vendors literally do not have access to material. They would not be able to print all the ballots, certainly would not be able to print all the envelopes. It would not be available. I'm not saying it couldn't happen in the next couple of years, but I don't believe there's any way it would happen in the upcoming elections.
To piggyback on what Supervisor Bennett just said, there's a few things about this. There is a mail ballot election under Florida law, but it's only for questions and referendums. We've only used that once in Sarasota County, and well, in recent history, once in Manatee County. We had a mail ballot election for the town of Longboat Key because they had a referendum, a question on the ballot, and they asked us to conduct that election by mail. And there's certain laws and statutes and things that you do. In fact, the envelopes and things that you see with vote by mail ballots for a mail ballot election are completely different. There's a completely set of rules and laws for that. You're not allowed to do that for candidates in Florida. So the law doesn't allow us, as Mike said, even if the governor gave an executive order saying to do this, which I don't think that he will, we don't even have the ability with our vendors and with our timelines. Florida's timelines are different than California. California has 30 days to certify their election after the election's over. Ours, we just have a couple of weeks to finish all of our work up after an election to certify in Florida. We saw that tight timelines in 2018 during the recounts. That became obvious. The other thing we do is open and process the majority of our vote by mail ballots before 7 p.m. and the polls close on election night. So when you hear the first results coming out in the media at 7 p.m., those are the majority of the vote by mail ballots, 99% of them, and all of the early voting, in-person early voting ballots. Those are those results first before you hear the precinct results. I will say, if you read the Sarasota Magazine article, one thing I pointed out is vote by mail in Florida is just no excuse absentee ballots. So there's some confusion with the terminology. Back in the early 2000s, the state of Florida went to no excuse absentee ballots, meaning you didn't have to have a reason to get an absentee ballot. And so that was created by the legislature and the governor at the time in the early 2000s. Then in 2016, the Florida legislature and the governor again took up this issue and changed the name from absentee to vote by mail, but they did not change the process of how it works at the time. So the only thing that's changed from no excuse absentee to vote by mail is the name in nearly 20 years in Florida. So it's the same process that's been around. And even before the coronavirus, we were anticipating at least 100,000 vote by mail ballots in Sarasota County from voters, Republicans, Democrats, and others. It doesn't matter. We would have already had 100,000 of those. Usually 30-some-odd% of voters vote by mail in a general election anyhow. That's not unusual by any stretch of the imagination. So this isn't new in Florida, what we're talking about, and nothing has changed. Not one law, not one procedure on this in Florida with vote by mail. It is all the same that it's been for many, many years in election cycles.
Great, thank you. As a multi-part question here, what is the postage required to mail in a ballot? Can you drop off a ballot at the polling place? And third, can you vote at the polling place if you requested and mailed in a ballot? No, requested a mail-in ballot. Sorry.
Ron? No? Me? Okay. If they have I got to tell you, the vote by mail ballot is a wonderful, wonderful thing, because people should look at it as an insurance policy. That on election, they're going to be able to vote, because you don't know, I don't know, are we going to have another virus breakout? Are we going to get called up to Minnesota because families are sick? Are the kids going to be, we don't know what's going to happen. Is the boss going to make us stay in? But if you've got that insurance policy at your house, you've had for 2 weeks, if you don't want to mail it back in, you don't have to. You can go to one of the early voting sites and drop it in the box. You can bring it to my office and drop it in the box. So we're going to accept those at any early voting site and at our offices up until 7 o'clock on the night of the election. Okay? So they don't have to mail it, but it's insurance policy. The other thing is you get a better educated voter. And the reason you get a better educated voter is because my wife and I are sitting around and we're discussing the ticket, we're discussing the ballot, we're discussing the candidates, and our kids are sitting there. And all of a sudden the kids get interested because they know it's an interest to mom and dad. And they hear mom and dad talking about the election. And pretty soon, guess what? They want to participate in the voting process. And so they start earlier. You get a better educated voter. We do not pay the postage in Manatee County. Some places do. I've actually said, I'm probably saving you money. It costs you 45 cents to mail it. Probably cost you $1.50 worth of gas to come down here and vote. So I'm trying to save you some money, folks. Okay, it does. It makes it convenient, but they can drop them off. If they go to the polling place, they've got the ballot in their hand. They can surrender it at the time and go ahead and vote. If they don't have it, we're still going to let them vote. They're going to vote for with a provisional ballot. And there's a lot of misconception about the provisional ballot, and I'll have Ron touch on that on the second half of answering this question. But they should also look at the provisional ballot as another insurance policy that their vote is going to count.
So I'll add on to what Supervisor Bennett just said. And as far as the postage is concerned, the return postage, we don't pay for that either. But the return postage is based on the weight of the return package and the ballot. So like for the March election, you had a simple 8.5 by 11 page ballot. One first class stamp or one forever stamp would cover that. November, you've got a much longer ballot. It could be more than one page, so the weight of that will be different. We actually weigh those return ballot packages in advance. We go to the post office, we make sure that we know the weight of that, and then we tell the voter in the instructions in the secrecy sleeves in multiple places in the vote by mail package how much that return postage is. So it is noticed on there. As Mike said, we have secure drop boxes where you can drop off a vote by mail ballot in person. You can return it by mail, but you can vote it in person, drop it off at our offices, or at early voting sites during early voting days and times. And then if you change your mind and you want to go vote in person, you can certainly do that at the polls or at early voting sites. You cannot return a vote by mail ballot if you're just dropping it off to use that vote by mail ballot at polling places on election day, because Florida law requires the Supervisor of Elections, him or her, to have those ballots in their office by 7 p.m. Postmarks don't work for vote by mail ballots. That only works for overseas and military who have 10 days to return those. But for domestic vote by mail ballots, we have to actually physically have those ballots back to us in our offices by 7 p.m. on election day. So whichever method works best, mail it back, mail it with plenty of time if you do mail it to get it back to us, or drop it off to us. And we do give you plenty of time because domestic vote by mail ballots, we start sending out 40 days before an election. That's the first drop. And overseas and military, we mail those at least 45 days before the election, which Mike and I are both military veterans. And I always say, I think it's appropriate for our men and women in uniform to get their ballots first, be able to get to vote first, and get to return their ballots to us first before anyone else in an election. So that's a wonderful thing the state of Florida does.
Let me add something else. I know one of the questions that people have been curious about is what is called ballot harvesting. And we'll touch on ballot harvesting later on in the question. But if somebody decides that they're going to, quote, help you out and collect all the ballots in your office and bring them in, that's not going to work. That's illegal in Florida. Ballot harvesting doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in the nursing homes. It doesn't happen anyplace. At least it doesn't happen legally. So when we talk about vote by mail, we're talking about either drop it off in the office, okay, or put it in a post office, either one.
Well, and let me add to that. There's a program in Florida under Florida law called supervised voting. And we actually go out in Sarasota County to assisted living facilities and others. We did. Now, the environment with the virus is a little different. So we'll see what August and November are like, and we'll have to work that out with these facilities. But prior to that, we would go to like 50 facilities in Sarasota County, and we would take them their ballots. We would have bipartisan teams. We would have Democrats and Republicans there, and we would allow them to vote their ballots, and we would take it back. That way, you wouldn't have any undue influence from possibly family or the facility workers or political parties or things like that. And as far as what Mike said, you know, political parties in Florida can't just come in and get stacks of ballots and take them out and vote to people. That is not how vote by mail works. We are only allowed, you have to request a vote by mail ballot. We're only allowed to mail it to the address that you have in your voter record that has already been vetted by us and has received mail from us. And if you want that ballot to go to another address, say Ohio or somewhere else because you're here part-time, you have to provide that forwarding address to us in writing. The voter, him or herself, has to provide that to us because we do not forward ballots, and the Postal Service isn't allowed to forward those ballots. That's a security measure. So we are dealing individually between the Supervisor of Elections office and the voter, as Mike said. This is a communication between us, and this is a transaction between us with these ballots directly, and not between us and, say, political parties and campaigns and things. Although they may be out there, those groups, soliciting the request, they're not actually handling the ballots.
Okay, here's a simple question, but certainly an important one. How does one go about getting registered to vote?
In Florida, in Florida, you need to be 18 years of age, of course, a resident of the state of Florida and the county where you're registering in. You need to be a U.S. citizen to register to vote. And then we've got the whole Amendment 4 thing, but I don't know that we have enough time today to delve into all the nuances of that. But for individuals with prior felony convictions can register to vote in Florida if they've had their rights restored. Again, that's a whole nother conversation. You can register online at registertovoteflorida.gov if you have a driver license or a Florida identification card, because what happens is you use that portal and that links to the DMV statewide, so it's vetting that information almost in real time there, and then, or you can use a paper application to register to vote. You provide us with a Florida driver license number or the last four of your social security number. We enter that information at the county level into the Florida voter registration system. That goes to the Secretary of State of Florida. They take that data and that information and they compare it to multiple databases so to see that you are who you say that you are, and they send that information back to the Supervisor of Elections, because only Supervisors of Elections in the state of Florida have the ability under Florida law to either register someone and facilitate someone's voting rights or deny someone their voting rights. No other elected official or no other person in the state of Florida has that authority, only your elected Supervisors of Elections. But we use that vetting data that we get from the state to make those determinations on voters. But it's very simple to register either by paper or online.
There's a question about how to become a poll worker. There's a couple here, and I'll kind of combine them. What are the requirements, and then how does one go about becoming a poll volunteer?
Right now, if they can fog a mirror, I want to talk to them. Okay, we're having a problem. But no, if they would contact our office, just call the office numbers. Ron and I numbers are published. It's all over the place, and I'll even give you mine. 741-3823. Just call the office. We are looking to talk to people. We pay them, I think it's around $250 for the day for a clerk, but there is a training process that they have to go through. But pretty much anybody who's a registered voter in Manatee County, they have to be in Manatee County, I can use as a poll worker. So in Sarasota, they have to be registered in Sarasota County. You have to live in the county of which you're going to be participating. So that's all we're looking for. Is some, and I got to be honest, we're actively hard recruiting bilingual people. That's a plus. But right now, we would really appreciate anybody who is retired looking to get more involved. We would really appreciate if they come down.
So you have to be a registered voter. I don't know if you can see this. Call 861-8640. Operators are standing by now to take your calls. That's how desperate we are for poll workers. It's like the home shopping network in here. We need help, and you have to be a registered voter of your county to be able to do that. You get paid. It is some people call them volunteers. Fine, they're paid volunteers if you want to call them that. We need help in August and November because we're getting a lot of questions again about vote by mail. And my response is the reason that we're talking about this to the same degree that we are right now is due to the virus. But a lot of that has to do with just the workforce that we need to open all the polling locations and early voting sites. Being a poll worker is a civic duty. And I would encourage people, if you've never thought about this before and you've got the time, then do it. I mean, if you don't need the money and you want to donate the money to your favorite charity or Rotary Club or something, then do that. But we need your help, and I would encourage you really think about it. And if you want to see how all this works on the front lines, how this process really works, where the rubber meets the road, sign up to be a poll worker. But you can call us, go to our website at SarasotaVotes.com. But we need your help. We need your friends and neighbors' help. So I would encourage you to think about it.
Here's a question about kind of COVID-19 related. From previous experience, it wouldn't seem you would have a problem social distancing at the voting sites. So is there more concern in other areas?
Well, again, it's, you know, I see this online, all the memes, you know, we can shop at Home Depot, we can go to the polls and vote. Well, right, but Home Depot has a different workforce than Mike Bennett and I do. Again, when you have people that are 69 years of age on average, it's not the social distancing thing. And I mean, we're going to do all of that, you know, reduce the number of voting booths if we have to, whatever the guidelines are from health officials and, you know, the federal government and the states. When we get to August and November, we'll comply with those as far as masks and whatever else we need, hand sanitizer. But the real challenge is the workers, because we need about 1,000, more than 1,000 people with early voting and election day to staff these places. So that's the real challenge. And I keep going back to that because it's not, you know, all the other things. Those are a challenge and we're working on it. And Mike and I worked on it in March, and we're going to work on it August, November with our staff. But the real challenge is poll workers, folks. Poll workers, people at Publix and Home Depot, different set of people than we have. Poll workers.
You know, something else that everybody might want to know, we were not able to secure all of the sanitizing and the masks and the rest of it for the PPP. Okay, it was just hardly any available. Right now, and I know that Ron is in the same box that I am, we will have masks available for our poll workers at the precincts. We have hand sanitization available at our polling places, and we will have hand wipes at our polling places. So we have been able to make a substantial jump from March, and so we expect to be able to have all of the personal protection paraphernalia available on election.
Right. Same. What Mike said, ditto.
Supervisor Bennett touched a little bit about on ballot harvesting. Just how big a concern is that in our region?
We've not seen it here, okay? But, you know, it's one of those things that I just read an article this morning, I believe it was in Texas, where they just arrested 4 ladies out there. I mean, literally this morning in the paper for doing exactly that, ballot harvesting. So sometimes when these things start, all of a sudden, geez, that's kind of neat. Maybe I'll do that too. And all of a sudden, you do run into an issue. I have not seen it in my county. I don't know that Ron has down there in Sarasota, but it's something that we would always be on the watch for. The legislature looked at it when we were there and limited the number of ballots that anybody can turn in, pretty much to family. Is what you're talking about,
or two, right? Or yeah. 2 for other people. You're limited to 2 others besides the immediate family.
Yeah, if somebody comes walking in here with 5 or 6 ballots, we're going to have the conversation.
Right. Yeah, we look for those things on the return end of the ballots and also on the request end. Where are these requests coming from? You know, even IP addresses and things like that. I mean, there's certainly a lot more nuances and processes that we're watching for. We did hear about the ballot harvesting, I think in North Carolina, maybe California, I think, but we've heard a lot about that too. But so far, we haven't experienced that here, but I know we keep a close eye on things. And if we do have issues, you know, we would address those with the voters or the appropriate, I know Mike or I both. I mean, if we had an issue and we needed to call the sheriff's office, the police, or the state attorney's office to deal with something, we would do that. But right now, we haven't had an issue with the ballot harvesting.
Okay, can you expand on the laws for felons to vote? Isn't there a vote on this election's ballot regarding this?
There's nothing on this coming up election. I'm sure their question was about Amendment 4. Amendment 4 is extremely confusing. I always refer to some of these elections as electile dysfunction. Well, let me tell you something. Amendment 4 is truly an issue because it's still under appeal, okay? And so we as the supervisors are the only ones in the state, as Ron pointed out, that can actually remove somebody or add somebody to the actual voting. Well, some of us are following the law in detail. Some of them are saying, hey, it's a little bit loose. In Manatee County, we have pretty much registered everybody who wants to vote, who can sign an affidavit that they are legally allowed to vote or that their voting rights have been restored. We're signing them up. We had some early confusion when the law first came out and said you had to pay your fines and fees. Okay, so we removed some people. Now we're sending all those people a letter saying, hey, looks like you're back in the game. So it's still confusing. And then you throw the fact that the governor and the state of Florida are appealing the latest court decision. So I don't quite know where it's going to end up, but I would encourage anybody who has a concern, if you're a felon in Manatee County, come on down and see us. If we say no, you certainly have a right to appeal and we will meet you in person. But I think that voting is the greatest right we have in this country. And I would hope that people would take advantage of it. And if there are any questions, please contact the office. I think it's that important.
And to echo what Mike just said, I mean, when Amendment 4 was passed and it became law in Florida in January 2019, and we started registering voters under that. If individuals can fill out the voter application and tell us that the rights have been restored, again, we send that information to the state, and as long as the state vets that and says it's okay, then we add that to the voter rolls. But I would encourage people, if they have questions about it, because I know there's been a lot of confusion because of all the lawsuits and media and things, to contact our office. I mean, we're here, Mike and I both. I mean, we're public servants. Our employees are. I mean, I joke sometimes. I say we use cold compresses, warm compresses, and hold voters' hands and gently walk them across the finish line, because we're in the business of trying to help everyone exercise their constitutional right to vote. And we take that very seriously, very passionate about it, and believe in this. And as Mike said, this is probably the most important right that we've had. Every election year is important, and we say that. This one is no less important than any other, and could be even more important to us. But every election is important, and we're just here to help people. So if we don't answer questions today, or someone has questions, people reach out to us every day of the week, our staff and us personally. I get emails from voters. I get direct Facebook messages and Twitter messages and things asking me questions, and I make sure they're responded to, all of them.
Okay, there's a follow-up question to the poll workers discussion. It sounds like there's certainly a need for workers this year. Anything being discussed about possibly allowing teens under 18, maybe at 16 or older to, get more bodies in there?
We have an active, yes, Florida law allows student poll workers or pre-registered voters. You can pre-register to vote at 16 or 17 years of age, meaning you fill out a Florida voter registration application, and when you turn 18, they're going to get a voter information card with Mike's name on it or mine, telling them that they're registered to vote. Congratulations, happy birthday on your 18th birthday. We all go to the public schools in the county and colleges to register them. I know we register a year, at least, again, before the virus impacts. We were registering in excess of more than 1,000, if not a couple of thousand students in the Sarasota County school system. Those pre-registered students are allowed to be poll workers. We've been promoting that for years and have a student poll worker program. But with that, at least prior to the virus, we might get a couple hundred students, 150, something like that. We haven't seen it. I'm seeing the chat window over here in the thousands. Yes, in theory, you could do that potentially, but the reality of it is you know, will they sign up to do that? But we will be aggressively, and we're already working on that, working with the colleges and the schools to try to find poll workers. We're looking for new ways to recruit. And I agree with the person who asked this question. This will be some resource. It may not be the thousands or 1,000 that we would like, but if we can get more from this pool of individuals that may have less impacts from the virus, at least that's what, you know, is thought at this point of the age group, then that might be, you know, hopefully at least some of the solution.
You know, you think about it. What a neat package for a kid. Okay, they're going to get a day off of school. They're going to get a couple hours of community service because when they go through the training program, so they're going to knock out 3 or 4 or 5 hours of community service. Okay, and I'm going to pay them a couple $100. Okay, I'll take that deal. If I was a kid, I might do it now. It's a great deal, and it's something for you all to talk to your teenage kids about. Especially, you know, we are actively looking, and it gets them involved in the patriotic system that we have in our country. Day off of school, paid a couple $100 to get community service out of the way. That ain't a bad deal. Kate's got that grin on her face. She's like, what? Kate, you can't.
Can you touch a little bit about the training required for poll workers? What's the time commitment? When is it?
You know, we have, and we're trying to work through that, obviously in this new environment, because training may look a little different. The time under Florida law is based on the position that you have as a poll worker. But typically you're talking about maybe 3 hours of training or so. It depends. Sometimes it's a little more, sometimes it's less, but you're talking about just maybe 3 hours of training, I think, on average, depending on the position. We do augment a little more than the minimum in Florida statutes because, you know, these poll workers do a great job for us. I mean, again, they're doing a patriotic service to all of us. And so we try to give them the tools, and they have a lot that they have to be in charge of that day, from checking the voters' end to making sure people get the right ballots, that they're tabulated correctly, setting up the polling place, closing it down, answering people's questions, changing addresses, you know, things of that nature. So it takes a little bit of training to do all that, and a reminder every election cycle. But we're looking at developing more online training. We've used online training to augment our in-person, but obviously in this new environment, when you have to social distance and have 10 or fewer people, that right now is, we're looking at how to be creative with our training.
Great. I think we're coming to an end here. I have one more question. Is it possible for someone to conceivably get away with voting in 2 different states? For instance, one vote by mail and another in-person vote in their home state? It's
actually possible, okay? Doesn't happen as often as a lot of people talk about. Here's the problem. Most of us have been registered in 2 states at the same time. Because when I moved down here from Iowa, I didn't go to the Iowa elections office and say, hey, take my name off. I just came down and registered here. So consequently, I was still registered in Iowa for a while. One of the things that we did in the legislature, and started actually when I was still in the legislature, is we got involved with something called ERIC, and it's electronic registration. And right now we have over 30 states who are participating. So when somebody comes in to register to vote in Florida, it's automatically sent through a database. It'll be sent through a database of approximately 30 states, and they're signing up new states all the time, that it would automatically check and say, Kate, you know, you're still registered in Michigan. We're taking you off. Florida's your new address. Now you're there. So we will cut down on some of that. Surprisingly, folks, there's not as much election fraud as you think there is, or that you've heard stories about. Most people are very, very honest. I agree, we get some people who are over enthusiastic, And so we watch it and we watch it close. But I do believe in the American people. There's nothing I can do about a thief. There's nothing I can do about a crook. But we watch it pretty close, and we are expanding that system so it doesn't happen. But the state of Florida is pretty darn good about trying to check those out.
Mike just mentioned ERIC, which is something that that the supervisors work with the legislature, as Mike said, back he was in the legislature, it was discussed. But supervisors in Florida, all 67 of us, worked with the Florida legislature and worked with Governor DeSantis to get him to sign on to this multi-state agreement. And it's about 30 states, so it's more than half the country now. And Florida is joining this consortium because remember, elections are not nationally run. And that's something else to think about in this whole vote with mail conversation. You know, we've heard conversation in Congress and things about potential bills and things, but those aren't really going anywhere. That a lot of that is politics, folks, frankly. Elections in the United States under the US Constitution, even federal elections, are run by the states. There are approximately 7,000 local jurisdictions that conduct the elections in the United States. The beauty of that from our founders is when you're talking about security, there's not one point of entry into the election system in the United States because it's so decentralized. But every state does it a little bit differently. But as Mike said, I think the state of Florida does a good job generally. And are we perfect? No. We're not perfect in Sarasota County. I tell people that nothing is perfect, but we do a good job. I believe, as Mike said, I believe in our voters in Sarasota County. I believe in the goodness of our voters and our people and the American people, and that they'll make the right decision at the end of the day. Sometimes it may not be the decision that we all agree with, and sometimes, you know, there may be bumps in the road and pain along the way. But we are resilient, and we will get through this virus. We'll get through this election cycle. We're always looking for ways to improve the process, as Mike said, and keep an eye on things and retool, and we will continue to do that. But I believe strongly in our voters and the system that we have in place.
Well, thank you so much. I think that sounds like a great place to end. I want to just point out in the chat, Dom shared a few contact information. Definitely check out SarasotaVotes.com if you're in Sarasota County, or VoteManatee.com if you're in Manatee. Thank you to all who submitted questions. And thank you, Supervisor Bennett, Supervisor Turner, for your time today. And with that, I will kick it back to Dom for some closing comments.
Well, again, thank you all. A virtual round of applause. We truly appreciate your time today, and I think we got some good information. I hope if you didn't get the information you need, you do have the contacts there, and you know they're obviously willing to take your call or take your email. So reach out and do what you need to make sure we get the people out to vote this year. So as a close, for our members, our community forum site on the website remains open. It's where you can post special hours, special offerings, or needs. If you need something and another member can help you, please use it. We had many or several non-members on with us this morning. We have begun a prorated membership. So reach out to Caitlin Driscoll if you're interested in the cost of that prorated membership for the remainder of the year. Pretty nominal cost. And then upcoming on Thursday, June 4th, Mike Bennett asked about an online social. Was telling us about another organization, I think the Chamber, that was doing one. We'll have a true online networking social at 4 o'clock on the 4th. We have another Leads coming similar to this one on Friday, the 5th, following the 4th at 11 a.m. That's going to talk about the new normal workplace, and we'll have some interesting conversation around how to ready your workplace. And then on Friday, June 12th, navigating a pandemic for nonprofits in conjunction with the Lakewood Ranch Community Fund. So again, thanks to Ron Turner and Mike Bennett for joining us this morning and now soon to be afternoon. And I hope you all enjoy your weekend, and thank you for spending your time with the Lakewood Ranch Business Alliance. Take care. Have a good day.
Thank you. Have a great day, folks.